Hello, Facebook Live. Hello, Instagram. Marcus here. Hello, YouTube. What's happening, everybody? Wanted to drop some information today about organic food, non-organic food, what to buy that's organic, what's not. Just a little guide to buying food, especially on a budget, or understanding the difference between organic versus non-organic. And going to quote the Environmental Working Group. Environmental Working Group does a great piece every year called their Dirty Dozen and their Safe 15. So I'm going to talk about that. Jamie and I just started a radio show called Chef on a Mission Radio. Chef on a Mission Radio. You can find that on iHeart, iTunes, Podbean, and I think we're going to be on Pandora, I believe. So check all that out. Chef on a Mission Radio. Jamie and I talk about things just like this on that show. I did Chef on a Mission Radio a few years ago. We did about 2 years worth of shows, and then we give it a 2-year break, and we are back now, Jamie and I. So we're 2 episodes in. So check that out. All right, so I hear people say to me, Marcus, what's the deal with organic? Is organic really better, or organic is just chemical free? So there's a couple reasons why you want to support organic. And organic's not the perfect system to begin with. So, and there's several different reasons for this. And Jamie and I talk about this in our next upcoming episode of Chef on a Mission Radio. We talk about, how the Organic Standards Act, the USDA Organic Standards, was written by big companies so big companies could play the game. It's a guideline. It's not a perfect guideline, but it allows these massive companies to come in and farm 3,000 acres of carrots year after year after year after year without crop rotation, to be able to come in and put down some type of fertilizer and do some type of spray and make it, but where it's less of an impact versus just commercial or conventional farming. So you have to understand that the organic certification is not perfect. There's biodynamic out there, which is a bit much more involved. If you truly want organic produce, you talk to a local farmer. You understand that they're not spraying anything. That's how you buy truly organic. Now, I'm not saying don't buy organic in the store, because that's your next best option, is going to the store and buying organic produce. The thing you're paying for organic is you're paying for that farmer not to spray chemicals on their property. You're paying for that farmer to keep going in that direction. Now, organic produce, no matter where it's grown, or who's growing it, can be contaminated with chemicals. But the farmer didn't put them on, the neighbor put them on, or somewhere else put them on, or it's in the water aquifer. It's somewhere. Some kind of chemicals may be getting in. So just because you buy organic does not mean it's a guarantee that it's going to be 0% pesticides. Nothing's going to be on there. There could be some kind of something on there. So that's always another factor to take in. So every year, the Environmental Working Group, EWG, puts out their top 15, their Dirty Dozen list of things to totally avoid, and they're things that are okay to eat, non-organic. So here we go. And this is the list that we use at the restaurant. Very strictly, we use this list at the restaurant. So the Dirty Dozen are the top 12. The top 12 most sprayed, most chemical residue, the most contaminated produce out there. This is called the Dirty Dozen, okay? So, and again, Environmental Working Group puts that every year. So here's the list, folks. Number 1, strawberries. They're the top of the list for the most chemicals. Strawberries. Number 2, spinach. Green leaf vegetable, spinach. Number 3, kale. And folks, you can grow kale in your garden, and kale's like indestructible. It'll grow in the wintertime. It'll be up in April, sprouting away, getting ready to go. Kale seems like a very indestructible crop, but it is very heavily sprayed. Nectarines and apples, stone fruits like that, always. Nectarines, apples, cherries are very heavily sprayed. So now these are the things I'm listing off right now, are the things that you want to be buying that are organic, certified organic, or from a farm that is not spraying anything. These are the Dirty Dozen, the worst 12 foods. And this is the list that we go by in the restaurant. So all the stuff that I'm listing off here in the restaurant Everything we're listing here in the everything I'm listing off in this Dirty Dozen, we try to avoid this stuff unless it's certified organic. Then we buy. That's our rule, and we've been doing this for years. So anytime we have spinach at the restaurant, it is going to be organic. Kale, organic, local. Nectarines, apples. Apples a huge one. Apples are always organic at the restaurant. So apples, grapes. We don't really buy grapes. Grapes, peaches, cherries, pears. Pears are another thing. We always buy organic for our pear salad. There's a couple times a year that organic's not available. Literally like 2 or 3 times that we go to order it, they're not available. But other than that, it is organic or local organic year round. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are one of those crops that is heavily sprayed. First of all, the problem with tomatoes is most tomatoes, especially right now, tomatoes are coming from Florida, the winter crop, or they're coming from other countries, but typically Florida. Florida has a massive winter crop of tomatoes. Florida has a couple of things going wrong for them when it comes to tomatoes. It's way too wet, and the soil's no good, all right, for tomatoes. Tomatoes originated like in desert-like conditions. The origins of tomatoes go back to, I think, Peru, to this very arid climate, barely any rainfall, and these things grow these little tiny tomatoes. So if you think about it, if you grow tomatoes in your yard at home, the wetter the summer is, the worse tomatoes you have, right? So they have to come in and spray and make sure the molds are down and all this kind of stuff, and it gets lots of pests. So they spray tons. I read a figure back, I think 2 years ago, that they spray over, I don't know, $3,000, $2,000 worth of chemicals per acre of tomatoes in Florida. And of course, it rains every day, and the sandy soil. Plus, there's other issues with tomatoes that go beyond that. The very unfair labor in tomatoes. So tomatoes is one of those things you should be buying organic. We had an incident lately where we buy tomatoes. We try to buy them year round from local sources. We either get them from here in Orange County, or they come from a farm in Maine that does winter growing. That does no spray, low spray. It's super conscious about what they're doing. And a local farmer came in and they called me after they left and said, Marcus, where are you getting your winter tomatoes right now? That's a really good tomato. And I said, yeah, we're getting them from these 2 greenhouse sources. He goes, wow, totally impressed with those. Keep buying those. Those are great. One of the problems with Florida tomatoes, and this law was passed in the 1880s, by the way, so this is how long the Florida tomato industry has been strong. In the 1880s, they passed a law, so again, the big growers can play the game here, and 0 tomatoes are allowed out of the state that are red. They all have to be green. If you're abiding to the standard principle of the Florida tomato, when they're shipped out of the state, they're green tomatoes. They're picked as hard as a base. You can play baseball with those tomatoes. They're ridiculously hard. If they fall off the truck, they'll roll around like a baseball and not even get damaged. This is like no joke. So the Florida tomato growers, that's what their standards are. That was a law that was passed. No red tomatoes out of the state. They're green tomatoes, and they're gassed heavily. And this is why people say, oh, those tomatoes taste like cardboard. Yeah, well, they basically are cardboard, full of tons and tons of chemicals. So tomatoes. Potatoes. Potatoes are another big one on the list on the Dirty Dozen. Folks, if you're just joining us, drop a comment, #live, or if it's on the replay, #replay. I'm talking about the worst produce to buy, the ones you definitely want to buy that are organic at all times. And then I'm going to talk about the ones that have the least amount of spray, that if you're buying conventional, there's still these are the least amount of contaminants, least amount of spray use. So right now we're doing the Dirty Dozen from the Environmental Working Group. They do this every single year. So if you're just tuning in, drop a comment, say hello, drop a comment where you're tuning in from. That's always helpful. Love to know where everybody's watching us and catching us from. So just do a quick recap. I've done 11 of the 12 on the Dirty Dozen list right now, okay? So here we go. Strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, cherries, pears, tomatoes, potatoes, and the next one is celery. So if you come to the restaurant, we never have celery. I just don't have celery at all. Because if I were to buy celery in the restaurant, I shouldn't say I don't have it at all. I do have it at some points. When I can get local organic celery and I can buy three head at a time, I get it. But if it's not in season, it's not local, the vendor who we buy our organic produce from wants me to buy a full case of celery. That's like 40 pounds. It's a big box of celery. I could never use it. I have to throw it out. So it would be very, very not cost effective at all for us to buy a case of organic celery at $80 and use 2 or 3 heads out of it. So we just opted not to buy celery at all. It wasn't worth it to buy conventional celery that easily splits from any vendor. I mean, we can call any vendor and just say I want 3 heads of celery. That's conventional, but it has up to 67 residues, 67 different pesticides and residues are on celery. So celery is the one thing that we never buy, basically almost never buy, just because it is a very dirty, contaminated crop. So you won't get celery stick in your Bloody Mary here. You won't get celery on our wings. So you get carrots. Carrots or cucumbers and things, and Bloody Marys and carrots on our Bloody Marys. That's the reason why. And then potatoes. Potatoes, the last thing there. Potatoes. Coming from Colorado, spending some time in Colorado in the late 90s and 2000, we were able to tour a lot of potato farms. Colorado's, I think, the 3rd largest producer of potatoes in the nation. Apples, too, they're 2nd or 3rd, depending upon the yields that year on crops. So I knew about apples being sprayed heavily, and I kind of knew about potatoes, and I learned something there. That potatoes, those oval baking potatoes, those russet Burbanks, the one that you bake French fries. This is the standard French fry potato. Everybody uses it for French fries because it's the one that has the good starch content. It's dry and has good starch content. So those potatoes, if you recall back years ago, you would cut into those potatoes and they get that little hollow brown spot inside. Well, that right there is very undesirable. So they have to spray those potatoes immensely to get those out, to not have those form. And we were in Colorado and on a farm tour where carrots are being grown. This was in the San Luis Valley. Carrots, potatoes, big for carrots and potatoes out there. And you can literally drive down the street in August and smell carrots everywhere because they're falling off the trucks. They're being picked everywhere. Everybody's got carrots and potatoes everywhere, but you could smell the carrots. They were the ones with the aromas. And we saw skull and crossbow signs around a farm. And we asked one of the farmers, well, what is that? And he goes, well, that's my potato field. We're like, well, what's going on? We're curious. And he goes, well, we had to spray them for what he just explained to me, that hollow thing that happens, that brown hollow thing. French fry processors don't like that at all. So we have to spray these potatoes with this neurological damaging chemical. And he goes, so by law, we're not allowed in the fields. And he goes, to tell you the truth, even if our irrigation broke, we won't go in the fields. That's how bad this chemical is, Marcus. I go, what, do you not eat potatoes? He goes, well, we eat potatoes. I just eat my neighbor's potatoes down the road. He farms organically, so we eat his organic potatoes. So I go down the street to the neighbor's farm. This is the White Mountain Farms. Paul and Ernie knew. They're the pioneers of quinoa in the U.S. Since 1980, they've been growing quinoa. I've been on the farm several times. And I say to Paul and Ernie, I said, what's this problem with potatoes? You guys are growing organic. And he said, Marcus, the potatoes that are affected with that inside hollowing out thing are the oval russet Burbanks and Dakota potatoes, the ones you make French fries with. He goes, if you grow the heirloom varietals around butterballs, fingerlings, Yukon potatoes, those potatoes aren't affected by that at all. So you don't have to spray those potatoes. So it's much easier to grow those potatoes organically. I said, oh my gosh, wow, why isn't everybody growing those more? Well, I know the answer because they don't make good French fries. And French fries are like the #1 convenience food in the country, next to potato chips. Potatoes are a very popular item for that. So that's why we're just so addicted to that style or that type of potato. So that's the Dirty Dozen, folks. These are the things to avoid at all costs if they're not organic. And this is the rules that we follow. These are the guidelines that we've been following at the restaurant for years. That's the Dirty Dozen. Strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, oranges, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes. Always organic. Now, here are the things with the least amount of spray. These are the things that are least affected with contaminants, that are least affected. So, here we go. These are 15. I'll go through this list a bit quicker. So I just have stories to tell a lot of the stuff here. So, avocados. These are the things that have the least amount of spray. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples. I didn't think sweet corn would be there, but I've seen sweet corn a couple times on this list. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples. Sweet peas, they're saying frozen sweet peas. Onions, papayas, eggplants, asparagus, kiwis. I didn't realize kiwis. cabbage, cauliflower. Cauliflower is up there. Now, I love cauliflower. We buy a lot of organic cauliflower when it's available, and we just buy an organic cauliflower till last week. The next batch here, I have to order in tomorrow. We'll see what's available, but cauliflower you can get away with. Cantaloupe, broccoli, mushrooms, and honeydew. I've always known mushrooms have been to be very low, all types of mushrooms. So that's the 15 the cleanest items out there as far as when it comes to produce. Now, here's the thing. When you buy organic produce, you're paying a farmer to keep his land clean. You're paying for a future. You're paying for the right thing. The more farms that we can support that are organic, the more our land will clean up, the less chemical resistant, less chemical dependency we'll have. We'll teach farmers how to grow better. And this can be done totally, folks, organically. Countries like Cuba have always done organic because they've never had the luxury to, the quote-unquote luxury, we think it's a luxury to afford the chemicals for this. So they've never had it. So they've mastered doing organic produce. And their produce is in high demand in the Caribbean because they're masters at it. Russia is another country. Did you know most of Russia's food is grown on small farms of less than an acre and a half? You're talking about one of the biggest countries, most populated countries out there. Even up until the big cities, most people's food is grown on less than an acre and a half of land. So when the agricultural big companies come and say to us, well, you need this mass production, you need this, you need that, we don't need as much as they say we need. So you growing food planting a garden, growing things, if you have never done that before, you will be amazed how much you can grow in your yard, in the yields in your yard. We grow kale here at the restaurant in the backyard over here, and we just keep picking and picking and picking kale and picking kale and picking kale and picking kale. I could go out there right now and pick kale. And then, if I had it properly weathered for the winter, or if it was a mild winter, there's been many wild winters where I go back there in the beginning of April and it's growing and sprouting again. And literally for Mother's Day, I can pick kale again. Or for Easter. For Easter, I can pick kale again. It's amazing. So you'll be surprised how much you can actually grow. That's why it's important to support organic. You're supporting a future. Supporting local is really, really important. And don't think that all local is organic, because all local is not organic. You have to know the farmer, find out what's going on, and that kind of stuff, because sometimes you might not want to buy local. Sometimes just because it's local doesn't mean it's good. Some people that do support local stuff are spraying massively, so you might have an option of buying something with low spray, no spray. And there's other terms to look for besides organic, like integrated pest management is one, where they're using other things to control the pests. So there's other different terminology out there besides the word or the term organic that you can look for. Integrated pest management is another one. There's several other ones. The word sustainable can be used, but there's no definition of the word sustainable. I told a story about how a wine grower said they were sustainable and they were spraying Roundup to prevent weeds. And then what he meant, he was sustaining his bank account, because that was the easiest way for him to cut down on expenses, was to use Roundup, and that made his bank account sustainable. So make sure that you understand what the word sustainable means when a farmer says we're sustainable. GAP certified is another one that's out there that has stronger principles and definitions. So look for all those. Folks, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Got a lot of people on Facebook, a lot of people on Instagram, and of course this makes its way to YouTube as well. So however you're watching this, thank you very much. Drop a comment where you're tuning in from. That's always great. Whether you're in New York or Florida or wherever you're at, Italy, the Philippines. We always love to see where people are tuning in from. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. So if you want to go find this on your own, the Dirty Dozen, look up EWG, Environmental Working Group, Dirty Dozen. EWG's Dirty Dozen, and you'll find EWG's Dirty Dozen and their Clean 15. And those are good guidelines. So if you're faced with, wow, I only have so much money, or how do I spend all this money on organic produce? You can simply say, I'll buy my avocados, my cauliflower conventional, but my spinach, my pears, my cherries, my peaches, my strawberries, all organic all the time. This is a good way to balance out your wallet when you're going to do that. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.